You talk about your personal insights. It's not some code. It's not some other's point of view. It must be your personal insight. You should not just like copy from one book and it says blah, 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 and find it interesting. It's not like going to touch the heart of the college professors.
Hello and welcome to this video. Today we have ShuZhe onto the channel to talk about his experience applying to physics at the University of Oxford. ShuZhe, how are you?
I'm fine today, yeah.
So let's get started and talk a bit about yourself. Who are you and what's your background?
Yes, my name is ShuZhe and I'm from China. But for my high school experience, I went to Singapore, studied in the National Junior College for 4 years. And I took the A-level, but not the usual one. I took the Singapore A-level. So kind of, it is a bit harder than the international A-level one. And the subject I do is like physics, maths, further maths, and economy. And after the high school, then I got in Oxford.
Yes, that seems like a very STEM-focused for choices you had for your Singaporean A-levels. Perhaps thinking a bit more about kind of those A-levels and what you did in high school. What were some subject-related ECAs that you did?
For subject-related extracurricular activities, I think one of them is like, especially for physics, the most important activity is definitely like competitions. So what kind of competitions I have joined is like, one of them is called, I think most people have heard of, it's like Physics Olympiad. So for me, because I'm in Singapore, so I joined the SPHO, which is Singapore Physics Olympiad. And other competitions that I joined, I found it very helpful. It's like something called SYPT. And actually there's also an international version. And basically the full name is Singapore Youth Physics Tournament. So what you do in this competition is basically, it's a mini project, a mini research project. So there are, I think, around 14 questions related to daily physics questions. And for these questions, you need to try to build models to explain those ideas. And you need to like design your own experiment and see what's the result. And from this result, and then you can conclude whether your theory or your model is correct. And after that, you need to compete with other groups. And you can give a presentation of your research to others, and others will look at it and basically point out what are the weaknesses and whether the theory is rigorous. And basically it's like just like an actual academia experience. Yeah, so basically we didn't write a paper, but kind of we need to write a report and others will comment on the report. And then the judges will see each group's like their performance and give like a range of grades. And at the end, like who wins. Basically, there's something what we call physics fight. And I think this is quite good because it practices your paper reading and also the way to presentation and for others, how to make your like presentations or your slides or visualizations very understandable for others. Yes.
That seems like a very interesting and worthwhile competition to be part of. I suppose there's two aspects when you're thinking about those ECAs. There's kind of the knowledge side of it, what you're learning from them, and also the soft skills side of it. You seem to talk a lot about the soft skills, the importance about being part of academic research and doing that type of understanding and knowledge. I was wondering whether, I suppose as a tangent, how much of the things you learned in those tournaments actually helped you or can be applicable to either university studies or the knowledge going into an interview, because sometimes having knowledge in an interview is quite a helpful thing.
Yes, so kind of for the knowledge I have learned from the competitions, it's basically like, actually those skills are quite like practical. So for example, what you learn is like for when you're designing experiments, well, in uni, you also need to do practical, or like if you want to really get into academia, you definitely need to design your own experiments. And those experience I learned from like the competition SYPT is quite useful. And it helped me to think like, because you need to think of like, in reality, there are a lot of like frictions or some other terms that we usually didn't consider in our theory. And we need to try to integrate it in the theory. And well, if you didn't include it in theory, you're trying to consider how to eliminate in your experiments. Yeah, so these kind of ideas, I think it's quite useful and important. especially in uni life. Yeah,
that's a very interesting point of view, because I guess the knowledge and also the practical skills that you learn is very important when it's coming to demonstrate to an admissions officer how good am I as an applicant. Perhaps developing a bit upon that, what are some non-physics or non-subject related ECAs that you did during high school?
Yeah, for me, I also did like one of the society I joined is Astronomy Society. And in that society, basically what we do is we organize stargazing events. So kind of from there, I get some organizing or management skills. Kind of you need to manage to design events for that night. If it is raining, then we cannot do stargazing. Then probably we need to do some like lectures on some interesting astrophysics topics. Or if there's stargazing, then we need to find a way to allocate the equipment for each member of the society. And we can do stargazing. And at the same time, as like we are basically the leading member of the society, we need to teach the students like, what are you seeing? And like how to use this telescope. Yeah, that's basically what we do in Astronomy Society. And I think the management skills or the skills like of how to make your concepts, how to make the knowledge you know very like maybe I can say down to ground for others, so they can get it very quickly. Yeah, I think that experience is quite useful.
Yes, that's definitely a very important presentation. Perhaps someone who might be at home might be thinking, well, okay, we love doing competitions, that's very important. These extracurricular, non-subject related extracurricular are very important as well. But perhaps they might be thinking, well, perhaps my school does not have a competition or have that many connections. What are some other ECAs that perhaps you've met some people and talked to them about, some other ECAs that someone could also think about to demonstrate that interest in physics?
Some other ECAs, I think, well, if you are talking about like some organization activities, I think one of them may be like some summer camps organized by unis. I think that's also quite useful. Or maybe like some summer camp organized by some physics intuition. For example, like this physics like observatory. Sometimes they will have summer camp, or there may be like some science institutions. They will organize like this kind of learning trips for like maybe I think high school students. Yeah, and also for competitions, you can actually go online. I think you can search for some, for example, like Oxbridge. Some colleges, they have their own competitions for high school students. Yeah, so I think it's basically for this kind of activities, you can go search online and you should find a lot of other opportunities. And I think another activities I want to mention, but I didn't do, is research. So I only did like for research part, I only did like the competition SYPT, but it's a very short-term research. So basically you need to produce a research result in a very short span. So kind of, it's not a normal research experience, but you kind of get some skills from it. But for actual research, I think it's a really good way for you to learn like during the process, because usually for physics, what we do is like from lectures and we learn about this concept, and in questions we are doing some like questions deliberately constructed for you to solve, and you just try to solve it. But for research, it's doing your own like some own topics and some questions that others may never consider, and you need to try to find some new way to understand it. So kind of, I think research is also a very good activity. So kind of, I think some same as before, it's like some unis or some institution, they have provided the opportunities for research. But at that time, I didn't choose one. Yeah.
So perhaps let's take a step back. What got you interested in physics in the first place?
So for the interest, actually, I think my passion started from quite young. Like when I was a very young child, I don't know I don't know much about science, but at the time, my parents bought me some books, on like just popularization books on science and about like space time, this kind of thing. So at that time, I was intrigued basically by science, and I tried to read more. But if you are talking about like the actual time I realized I love physics, it's basically in high school. It's because I started like doing Olympia, and also when I was doing Olympia, I suddenly found, well, I was confused sometimes. Like, because I think, like for A-level syllabus, they only give you the result. Usually they don't talk about like the derivations and what is the motivations behind each concept and or theorem or principle. So at that time, due to this kind of curiosity, what is actually happening here, and especially one theorem or principle that caught my interest is like the Archimedes principle. So basically saying that any object that is submerged in water, the buoyancy force it experiences is equals to the volume it displays times something. Basically, that's Archimedes principle. And the principle intrigued me very much because this principle doesn't care about the shape of the object. And that's a very strange principle to me, because I think for most principles that we see is very general. But for this one, the proof I see in the book is about like a cubic. But how can a cubic proof can be applied to all shapes? So I was quite intrigued and did my own research. And later I found the result is because of like multivariable calculus. And I also learned further about classical mechanics and so, and I found it like so much thing that in syllabus that it didn't explain actually makes sense if you actually learn it rigorously from the start. Everything makes sense, but it's just the syllabus. They don't have that that much space to contain those interesting stuff. So it's at that point I found that I really love physics. I really want to know more about how do these physicists use this kind of theory to understand the world around us.
Last we talked, you said you were quite interested in astrophysics or metaphysics as well. Not metaphysics as philosophy, but quantum physics as well. What got you, I suppose, from Archimedes of theorems to quantum physics? How did that kind of happen?
Yeah, kind of. It's because like, well, for quantum physics, it's for Archimedes principle or this kind of things, they belong to the category of classical mechanics. But classical mechanics can't explain something, especially. Actually, we usually think of quantum physics as something like very abstract, very like not close to our daily lives. But actually, there's one thing that manifests quantum physics so much. For example, it's just this thing, this magnet. Magnet cannot be explained by classical mechanics, and that's because in classical mechanics or classical dynamics, electrodynamics, you will see that magnets shouldn't exist. There's a such theorem for it. If you just follow the principle of like Maxwell equation, you cannot derive it. So basically, that's kind of magnet is one motivation for quantum physics. And other things, for example, like light or any material like glass, can only be explained if you try to understand the quantum property of matter. For example, like classical mechanics, classical electrodynamics, they are all theory which is only focused on macroscopic. So they do not care about what is actually happening in the microscopic. So for these atoms, what kind of properties they have. For classical mechanics or classical theory, they usually don't care that much about it. So that's why I get more into quantum physics, and I love it because kind of it try to explain it from the ground.
That's a really insightful discussion so far. If you're enjoying this video so far and want more interviews like these, then go check out our YouTube channel. You can find interviews with other students at Oxford and also students around the world at top universities like Cornell University. Also, if you are applying to universities yourself, go check out a copy of the UCAS College Guide and the UCAS Bible. These two books are written by me and have been put together by the knowledge which has helped loads of students get into the top universities around the world, like Oxbridge, Ivy Leagues, and so much more. So I hope these books will help you out. Links to them will be in the description below. Without further ado, let's carry on with the interview. Perhaps let's talk a bit more about the application itself. We've talked a bit about your development and how that development has tied in to kind of getting you into Oxford. But perhaps let's think about your application itself. What are 5 aspects of your application that most helped you get into Oxford?
For me, it's the first one will definitely be, I think, from high school education or A-level education. Even though the syllabus is not entirely complete, but it gives me a taste like for math and physics. So I think it gives me a quite good foundation. Yeah, so basically it's kind of like a starting point for me. So I think that's important. And another thing is definitely my self-exploration of physics. So kind of I study on my own or read different books, textbooks of physics. And these things actually, I think, give me most confidence and make me very prepared for the uni study. And next is definitely advice or suggestions from seniors. These seniors, they can include actually my senior students. Like some of them actually go to Oxbridge, so I can connect them and ask them, how should I do my application? And can you help me look at my personal statement and give some suggestions? And those suggestions are very like useful and actually insightful because they have experienced what is actually happening, and they have kind of like all of their friends is also in Oxbridge, so they definitely know a lot about like how do you apply well, how do you like what should you avoid. And other seniors can be your teachers because they also have seen like each year's students, what is their application result, so they can give some suggestions from there. And next very important point, I think it's for me is definitely support from friends, teachers, and family. And it's because this kind of their support, I can have like the ability to apply and to actually don't need to worry that much about like the support from my family, this kind of thing. And the last and most important, I think, is my own confidence. You need to trust yourself to do this, because I know that in application process, you will sometimes be very frustrated and be very worried about like, will you get the result? Will you like get in? But actually, you should just try to trust yourself and do the thing. And because kind of those kind of frustration can't help you go further in the applications. It's this kind of trust and confidence can push you to do work and to achieve more in this kind of application process.
Yes, I think that's such an important thing. I mean, all the points you raise are so important, especially when you talk about kind of not feeling too worried after you send in the application, having confidence in yourself. And that's something which I think has been the same throughout every single person I've talked to, interviewed. I mean, you could find that in Eden's interview as well. You should go check that out if you're interested in applying to material science. But he was also saying, once you've send in the admission, just don't worry about it too much, because there's nothing you could do. And that mental stress, that mental kind of pressure on you is just not going to do you any benefits. Now, perhaps we could develop upon that a bit more. And you talked about the personal statement. What would you say are some tips, I guess, now that you might be the senior and perhaps the people watching this video are the juniors, perhaps? What would be some advice for physics personal statement?
For physics personal statement, I think the tips will be like, first, you need to understand if you're applying for UK universities, you need to be quite academic, because this is the UK university, what does they care about? So kind of you need to talk about your personal insights. So this is very important. It's personal insights. It's not some code. It's not some other's point of view. It must be your personal insight about this subject, about your own interest, about your curiosity. So kind of you should not just like copy from one book and it says blah, 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 and find it interesting. It's not like going to touch the heart of the like the interviewer or the college professors. So the thing about personal statement is you need to try to make it into your story, like how you get into this topic, what like attracts you into it, and try to add your personal voice. So make it sound more I shouldn't say persuadable, maybe like more touching, more interesting. And then you can talk about like maybe your struggle in the process, trying to understand, and then what did you do to actually overcome that struggle, to overcome that problem. And maybe this kind of overcoming, you realize something, and that realization is very important, and that is just your personal insight. And the whole story makes it more sounds more interesting, and makes the professor want to talk to you and maybe like know more about you. Yeah, so that's one tip, I think, my tip for personal statement.
So now you go beyond the personal statement, getting beyond the personal statement, especially for Oxford, because Cambridge, they give out interviews like crazy. I'm not trying to insult Cambridge here, but we are Oxford students, so I mean, you have to bear that in mind. But one thing that comes after the personal statement, if you're successful, is an interview. What would you say are some of the tips for an interview?
I think my tips for interview is two things. I think first is communication. So again, you need to communicate with your seniors, with any source of reliable person. For example, for seniors, they can actually tell you what happened in their interviews, and they can actually give you some suggestions, especially for that colleges, because kind of interview depends on which college you are applying to. Some college may be like, say, professor, for physics, say like more math questions, then probably you should be more prepared in math part. Or and at the same time, you need to do your own research on that college. Either tutor maybe who is interviewing you, so kind of what kind of specialty he is doing. Maybe he is doing like content information. So maybe kind of you need to prepare your computing or information theory. Yeah. And for communication part is also like about, if you are not sure about the interview, just email the college and ask them politely. Yeah, because this kind of communication can avoid some problems or issues sometimes, especially for my case, because when I was doing my interview, actually, I was in quarantine. So kind of at that time, I don't have my tablet, I don't have my iPad and other things. I only have one laptop and pen and paper. So I asked them, can I write on the paper and show the answer to you? And they said yes. So, and even in the interview, I asked them this question first to ensure like I can do this kind of stuff in the interview. So if I didn't ask that, probably in the interview, it may be like takes more time and I may be more stressed out. Yeah, so I think communication is really important, not only with your seniors, with your teachers, but also with the college side. And next very important thing is definitely calming down. Don't stress yourself too much before interview. So kind of, I think one very good tip for interview is that 1 hour before the interview, already try to find a quiet place for yourself alone and calm yourself down. Don't need to like study so much before interview, because at that point you are already prepared and you need to have the confidence in yourself. Maybe you can take deep breaths for a few cycles, just to calm yourself down and empty your mind and be prepared for the interview, and like get into the interview call like earlier. Don't get into like last minute. If there's like an internet loss, then it may not give a good impression for the interviewers.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is my tips for interview.
Definitely. Perhaps moving on to that, we ask this to every single person. What is the hardest part of your application, and what were some of the things that you did to overcome it?
So for me, it's probably, I think, it's actually about like, what should I do for application at first? Because I'm applying from Singapore, and actually for most Singaporeans, they didn't apply for UK or US universities. For most of them is they will just stay in Singapore. So kind of I need to find the right person to consult. So luckily for our school, we have some teachers who has some experience in application, and ask him. And also like I said, I try to contact my seniors about like what should I do in applications, and they basically all give me very useful tips and give like, where can I get those informations? Because sometimes for us it's a information gap. It's because if you just search online, the efficiency of getting information sometimes is too low. So kind of, if you have some seniors or anyone you can contact with, or actually you can go to like some college pages. If you see maybe some undergraduates, or I think some colleges on their web pages, they already have like, if you are like is it called visionary students, or yeah, you can contact them and for tips in applications. Yeah.
No, I think that's definitely a very important thing. Reaching out to people is a very important part of all the advice I give, because on one hand, it's very easy for us to say, well, there is one system that you must do X, Y, and Z, and you'll get in. But then that's rarely the case. But what's most likely the case is that every person comes from a different background. And as a result, you just need that structure of reaching out to people in who's done it from your background. And that's a very helpful way to help you move forward and overcome that challenge. Now, finally, let's end off this interview with perhaps 3 tips for someone who's applying. You can go back to maybe where you were in before 6th form and think about, okay, what are some tips would I give that student?
Yeah, I think there are 3 tips I can give for physics application students. So first is you must have passion if you want to study physics in uni. Otherwise, it's a bit hard because, I mean, physics as a subject itself, it relies heavily on math. So kind of, especially in Oxbridge, this kind of fast-paced study place, you really need to do a lot of math calculations, and I know the process can be very frustrating. Sometimes you may get a mistake and you don't know where is it, and so kind of you need to have the passion for it to learn it. You cannot say, well, I just want to get in Oxford, so I choose physics. Well, that's not a right attitude. And secondly is, I think it's important you should never be satisfied at shallow understanding of something. Because for physics, we know there are a lot of like popularization books, which can attract you to physics. But those books say their purpose is only stops there. Their target audience are the like general audience. They are not for like the specific interested students who want to know more. So if you want to, if you get interested by these books, you should also do your own research. You can read a textbook, you can open YouTube to watch a lecture, to actually understand the things like how to derive maybe those phenomena rigorously. So I think that is very helpful. So don't satisfy at a shallow understanding. And third tip is that you should learn some computing skills. Like basically, maybe you can learn Python, you can learn C++. I mean, this is a big data age. So every equipment in lab is kind of collecting vast amount of data. And we rely on computational scripts to analyze them, to visualize them. So kind of it's very helpful if you can learn some computational skills. And also like this kind of visualization or analysis process also prepare you to understand further about this concept, because you can now manipulate like the data and maybe get yourself a better understanding. And lastly, this kind of computation skills is also a preparation for career if you do not want to pursue an academia in the future. So basically, I think these are the 3 tips I gave.
That's a very important idea, and especially the idea to go in depth into your subject is so important, because I mean, when I meet people at Oxford, one of the things I love is that I'm able to talk to someone like ShuZhe. In fact, the very funny thing is I met ShuZhe at Eden's birthday party, and then we spent an hour in a very loud pub talking about quantum physics and free will and the philosophy of that for like an hour. That's a brilliant thing about studying at top universities. But it goes to show that if you want to get into the top universities, you really need to be able to show that, okay, I haven't just read the most popular book on the top of New York Times, but I've actually done my research into the content behind it and the different nuances which are found beneath it. And that's a very important part for anyone attempting to apply for university. Thank you so much for coming on to this channel. Like always, if you do want to watch more interviews with ShuZhe, we'll be talking about what life is like studying physics at Oxford. Also, if you want more interviews about how to get into top universities, make sure to like and subscribe and share this channel with your friends. It's our goal at Logos Education to reach the world with affordable and accessible college consulting advice, so make sure you stay tuned here. Furthermore, if you want more advice about applying to top universities, go check out our books, the US College Guide and the UCAS Bible. These are very good starter books to get you through the UCAS process and the US process, where we talk about different things about the personal statement, different tips, kind of the mindset you need to get into the top universities. These could make the difference. So make sure you go check it out. Link will be in the description below. Stay safe. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. I'll see you in the next video.